Before we start, can you please say your name and that you give me permission to use this interview for my class project?
My name is Joel Barrera, and I give you permission to use this on your class project.
Thank you. So I just finished interviewing my dad, and when I listened to that clip, it sounds very formal, just a name and a permission for this project, right? But behind that voice was a 12-year-old kid who packed up his whole life in the Philippines and landed in Long Beach, California without really knowing what he was walking into. At 12 years old, you're barely figuring out middle school. You're not thinking about immigration, identity, or starting over in another country. You just go where your family goes. So I asked him what he thought it would be like before he got here. And keep in mind, this is based off only some stories that he's heard. There's no social media, no YouTube, nothing like that. So bear with that.
I was only 12 years old then. I do not really have a good imagine of what life will be here like. Since I was kind of young and we didn't have a lot of exposure, how the United States would look like, back in the days like that. Not the way we have it nowadays, where you can pretty much see everything that's going on the other side of the world. But aside from the stories that they told me that they have, like the roads or the freeways that they have over here have like 6-lane highways. That really blew my mind.
What's crazy to me is what stuck with him. And it was the highways, not movie stars, not beaches, not big houses like you would expect, right? But highways, 6 lanes wide, bigger than anything he'd ever seen before. It's such a small detail, but it really says a lot. To him, California wasn't very specific, it was just larger. It was wider, it was more open. A place that felt physically and maybe even symbolically bigger than the life he was leaving behind. But once he arrived, that big feeling didn't translate into comfort right away.
It was kind of, I wouldn't say boring. It was kind of lonely. When I got here, but I knew it was a different way of life, just because I understood that people are actually just working out there and busy with their lives, and at the
That word lonely, it changes the picture completely. Back in the Philippines, you could step outside and see relatives. Kids were around, people talked, there was noise, movement, constant interaction. Like you could walk outside and you'll see family everywhere. Everyone was family in that entire town. In Long Beach, people were working, doors were closed, everyone seemed super busy with their own routines. It wasn't that anyone was unkind, it was just a different rhythm of life. They're more individual, more structured. Even as he moved around California over the years, sometimes without close friends or relatives nearby, he said something that really stood out to me.
there are places where I moved to, within the area that we didn't have friends or relatives, but I always felt like I belong, just because the way California is, it's a big melting pot, and
He always felt like he belonged, and that doesn't mean it was easy. It doesn't mean there weren't challenges with that. But California being a melting pot meant that he wasn't the only one adjusting there. There were different languages, there were different cultures, different faces everywhere. He wasn't stepping into a space where everyone looked the same and he stood out. He was stepping into a place already built on difference and diversity. That made belonging possible. But when I asked him what people misunderstood about California, especially people who've never lived here, his tone shifted.
they think we're just shoveling or picking up money, from out of the
think it's
ground
easy.
or from the trees or something like that, right? They think it's easy just to make money, but it's not. It's actually a lot harder. The way of life here is a lot harder, because you're always you have this mindset that you want to be successful, you want to provide for your family, so you work hard, right? And money is not easy to come by, right? So
That part right there is straight honesty. From far away, California can look effortless. It looks like success just happens here. That's all that happens. But like opportunity is an automatic thing. But listening to him, it's clear that nothing was handed to him. He had to adjust to a new country at 12 years old. He had to navigate that loneliness at the beginning. He had to learn a new rhythm of life. He had to work consistently to build that stability. When I step back and look at his story, I don't see a dramatic transformation. I see something slower and more real. I see someone who imagined highways, someone was something wide and open, and then spent years building his own path inside that space, you know? California didn't erase where he came from. It stretched his world. And that stretching in that in between space between two cultures, two rhythms, two versions of home, that is what shaped him the most. You know, listening to him talk about how money isn't just picked from trees, this really connects to what we've been learning in class. You know, in Houston's From El Dorado to the Pacific Rim, he talks about how California has always been imagined as a land of opportunity. From the gold rush to modern immigration, people come here believing there's something bigger waiting for them. My dad's story really fits that pattern. Even before he arrived, California already built up in his mind as a place where hard work could turn into something more. But in California, why we come, that it pushes that idea even further. He questions whether California is truly a land of easy success or whether that belief is more myth than reality. But my dad's experience shows both sides of that. You know, the opportunity was real for him, but it wasn't automatic. It required adjustment, sacrifice, and constant work. But his story, it fits a bigger theme we've discussed in class. That theme is that California isn't just a place, but also it's an idea of things like reinvention, mobility, mixing pop culture, or melting pot culture. But at the same time, it's a space where people have to negotiate identity and belonging. When I step back and look at his story, again, I don't just see immigration. I see that larger California pattern, you know? People arriving with hope, people arriving with just adjusting to reality and slowly building something over time. California didn't hand him the success that he has now, but it gave him space to work toward it. And maybe that's what makes California different. It's not effortless, it's not guaranteed, but for people willing to adapt and work, it can become a home. So thanks for listening to this podcast. I actually had a lot of fun making it. So yeah, bye.